I have been a judge for over 40 years, and in all that time, there is one truth I keep coming back to. The courtroom does not lie. People lie. Lawyers argue. Politicians spin stories. But the courtroom itself, this room, these walls, this bench where I sit every single day, it always finds the truth. Always. I have seen things in this room that would break your heart in half. I have also seen things that restored every single piece of it. But nothing, and I mean nothing in my 43 years on this bench, prepared me for what happened on a cold Tuesday morning in November. Case number 2024 CR 7741. The day a young man walked into my courtroom carrying the weight of the whole world on his shoulders, and a wealthy boy walked in carrying nothing but arrogance. What happened next is something I still think about when I go home at night. Before I tell you the full story, let me ask you something. Have you ever watched someone be humiliated for doing the right thing? If that makes you angry, and it should, then you are going to want to hear every single word of this. If you believe that real justice still exists in this world, subscribe to this channel right now and hit that bell, because every story I share is true, every lesson is real, and this one right here is one that you absolutely cannot miss. It started the way so many cases do. I walked into my courtroom on the morning of November 19, 2024, at exactly 8:51 a.m. My clerk, Officer Denise Hargrove, handed me the docket for the day. 22 cases, parking violations, speeding tickets, the usual pile. But one case had been flagged the night before with a special notation. It read, "Defendant requests compassionate consideration, family medical emergency ongoing." I always pay attention to those notes. I have learned over 4 decades that a note like that is either the truth or it is an excuse, and I have a very good sense of which is which. The first name on that flagged case was Marcus Rivera, 23 years old. Address listed as 47 Spruce Street, Providence, Rhode Island. Occupation, nursing assistant, St. Mary's Hospital, second shift. He also had a second job listed, overnight stock associate at the CVS Pharmacy on Broad Street. 2 jobs, 23 years old. I already felt something stir in my chest before the boy even walked through the door. The charges against Marcus were as follows: failure to yield at a controlled intersection, driving with an expired vehicle registration, and a third charge that had been added 2 days after the incident, reckless operation of a motor vehicle. That third charge felt strange to me right away. It felt like it was added on purpose, like someone wanted to make sure this young man had no easy way out. The incident report was filed on the evening of November 14th at 7:23 p.m. The location was the intersection of Westminster Street and Atwells Avenue, here in Providence. According to the official report, Marcus Rivera's 2009 Honda Civic, a car with 187,000 miles on it, I noted, had allegedly failed to yield at a green light, resulting in a collision with another vehicle. The other vehicle was described in the police report as a 2023 Lamborghini Huracan Technica, silver exterior, valued at approximately $287,000. The driver of that Lamborghini was one Connor Bradshaw, age 29. I set the folder down for a moment and looked at those 2 names side by side. Marcus Rivera, Connor Bradshaw, a nursing assistant with 2 jobs and a 10-year-old Honda Civic, and a 29-year-old driving a $287,000 sports car. I have been doing this long enough to know that the story being told in that police report and the story that actually happened are sometimes 2 very different things. Marcus Rivera walked into my courtroom at 9:08 a.m. He was wearing dark slacks and a clean white button-down shirt. You could tell the shirt had been ironed that morning, carefully, like it mattered to him to look respectful in this room. He was thin. There were dark circles under his eyes, the kind you get when you haven't slept properly in months. Not weeks, months. He walked slowly, and when he reached the defendant's stand, he placed both hands on the railing in front of him, as if he needed something to hold on to. He looked up at me and said, "Good morning, Your Honor." Quiet voice, gentle, the voice of someone who has been trained to be careful with people. I said, "Good morning, son. Are you Marcus Rivera?" He nodded and said yes. I asked him if he had an attorney. He shook his head and said no, he could not afford one. I told him that was all right, that I was going to make sure he had a fair hearing regardless. He nodded again, and then something happened that I did not expect. His chin trembled, just for a second. He pressed his lips together and looked down at the railing and took one slow, steady breath. And I knew in that moment that this boy was holding something enormous inside him, something that had nothing to do with the traffic ticket in front of me. I was about to ask him to tell me his side of the story when the courtroom door opened behind him, and that is when Connor Bradshaw walked in. Now, I want you to picture this, because the contrast was something my courtroom has rarely seen so nakedly on display. Connor Bradshaw walked in like he owned the building. He was wearing a charcoal blazer over a fitted black shirt, and I could see the orange stitching of an Hermes belt looped through pressed trousers that probably cost more than Marcus Rivera made in a week. He had a Rolex Submariner on his left wrist, the black dial, stainless steel, approximately $10,000, and he was carrying a Louis Vuitton monogram document case in his right hand. His personal attorney, a man named Gerald Pierce of Pierce & Associates on Benefit Street, walked in right beside him, already shuffling papers. Connor Bradshaw's hair was perfect. His shoes were shined, and he walked with his chin up in a way that told me he had never once worried about the outcome of anything in his life. He did not look at Marcus when he passed him, not even a glance. He sat down, leaned back in his chair, and actually crossed one leg over the other like he was waiting for a coffee order to arrive. His attorney leaned over and whispered something to him. Connor Bradshaw smiled. Just slightly, just enough for me to see it. I have been watching people in this courtroom for 43 years. That smile told me everything I needed to know. That young man believed this was already over, that it was settled, that the outcome had already been arranged. And that smile made something very specific rise up inside me. Not anger, not yet, something colder than anger, focus. I turned back to Marcus Rivera and I said, Mr. Rivera, before we get into the facts of this case, I want to ask you something directly. The notation on your file mentions a family medical emergency. Can you tell me about that? And the courtroom went very quiet. Marcus looked up at me. He swallowed hard, and then he said, Your Honor, my mother, she has cancer. He paused. Stage 4, pancreatic cancer. She was diagnosed in March. His voice did not break. He would not let it. She can't work anymore. I'm the only one taking care of her. That's why I have 2 jobs. He paused again. And that's why I was at that intersection that night. I was coming from the pharmacy on Broad Street. Her pain medication prescription had just come in. I had called ahead. I was picking it up before my overnight shift. The courtroom was absolutely still. I looked down at the case file. I looked back at Marcus. And I said, How is your mother doing right now, son? He took that same slow breath he took when he first walked in. He said, The doctors told us last week she has maybe 3 to 4 months left, Your Honor. And then, just for one single second, his voice cracked. Just one crack, like something small breaking under enormous weight. He closed his eyes, opened them, and looked straight at me. I'm sorry, he said. I'm trying to stay focused. I could not speak for a moment. I am not ashamed to admit that. I had to look down at my papers for a few seconds to collect myself, because in 43 years on this bench I have heard many hard stories, but there is something about a young man, 23 years old, working 2 jobs, ironing his shirt to come stand in my courtroom with dignity while his mother is counting her last months at home. There is something about that that goes straight through every professional wall you have ever built. Now, before I tell you what happened next, because what happened next is where this story gets truly unbelievable, I want to challenge you to something. Drop a comment right now and tell me, if you were sitting in my chair in that moment, what would you have done? Would you have looked at that case file and called it a traffic ticket, or would you have dug deeper? Comment below, because I genuinely want to know. And if you're not subscribed yet, do it now, because what is coming next is the moment this case changed forever, and you do not want to miss a single second of it. I called Connor Bradshaw to present his account of the November 14th incident. His attorney, Gerald Pierce, stood up first, and spoke for approximately 4 minutes. Polished, professional. He painted a very clear picture. His client, Connor Bradshaw, had been driving lawfully through the intersection with a green light when Marcus Rivera's vehicle had entered from the cross street without yielding. The collision had caused significant damage to Mr. Bradshaw's vehicle, $34,000 in bodywork, according to the estimate Pierce slid across the clerk's desk. He emphasized that Mr. Bradshaw had shown great restraint in not pursuing a personal injury lawsuit against Mr. Rivera. Great restraint. Those were the exact words he used. I watched Connor Bradshaw while his attorney spoke. He was nodding along slowly, confirming, agreeing with everything, still with that slight angle to his chin that told me he had never sat in an uncomfortable chair in his life. I let Pierce finish. Then I turned directly to Connor Bradshaw and said, "Mr. Bradshaw, I'd like to hear from you directly, not from your attorney, from you." Pierce started to object. I held up one hand and Pierce sat back down. Connor Bradshaw uncrossed his legs, leaned forward slightly. He looked at me with very calm, very light blue eyes and said, "Of course, Your Honor." His voice was smooth, practiced. I was traveling westbound on Westminster at approximately 28 miles per hour. The light was green. The other vehicle came through without stopping. I had no time to react. He spread his hands slightly, a gesture that said, "What more is there to say?" "I'm just grateful no one was seriously hurt." I said, "No one was seriously hurt?" He said, "That's correct." I said, "Mr. Rivera's vehicle sustained $9,200 in damage according to the collision report. His car is a 2009 Honda Civic worth approximately $4,500. Are you aware of that?" Connor Bradshaw blinked once. He said, "I'm sorry to hear that." He did not sound sorry at all. I looked at the traffic data printout from the intersection camera request my clerk had processed the day before. The camera at Westminster and Atwells is part of the city's smart traffic network, managed by the Providence Department of Transportation. The footage timestamp read November 14th, 7:23:09 p.m. I had reviewed the footage that morning in my chambers. The footage showed one thing very clearly. Connor Bradshaw's silver Lamborghini had entered the intersection at 7:23:09 p.m. The traffic light on his side of Westminster Street had been red for 4 full seconds before his vehicle crossed the stop line. Marcus Rivera's Civic had entered the intersection on a green light from Atwells Avenue. At exactly 7:23:11 p.m., the Lamborghini struck the driver's side of the Civic at an estimated 47 miles per hour in a 25-mile-per-hour zone. The collision impact pushed Marcus Rivera's vehicle 34 feet down the road. I set the printout down. I let the courtroom stay quiet for a moment. Then I said, "Mr. Bradshaw, I have reviewed the intersection camera footage from that evening. The footage shows your vehicle entered the intersection on a red light. Not Mr. Rivera, you." I watched his face. His jaw tightened, just slightly, but his eyes stayed calm, too calm, like he had been told by someone that no matter what I said, the outcome was already settled. He leaned back, glanced at Pierce, and then he said something that made my courtroom go completely silent. He looked at me, looked right at me, and said, "Your Honor, with all due respect, I think we both know how these things get resolved in Providence." He said it quietly, almost pleasantly, like he was reminding me of a rule that we both already understood. "I want you to sit with that for a moment. I think we both know how these things get resolved in Providence." That is what a 29-year-old man said to me, to my face, in my courtroom, in front of everyone. What he meant was clear. His father was City Councilman Raymond Bradshaw, District 2, who had served on the City Council for 11 years. What Connor Bradshaw was telling me, with that quiet, pleasant voice and those calm blue eyes, was that his father had already made phone calls, that the outcome was already arranged, that I was, in his view, a small obstacle in a process that was already complete. I looked at him for a very long time, and then I said, very quietly, "Son, you just made a very serious mistake. Now here is where it gets extraordinary. Here is the part that you have been waiting for. Because what my clerk placed on my bench next, information that had come in just that morning from a source I'm about to tell you about, That is where this story stopped being about a traffic ticket entirely. Stick with me right here because I promise you what comes next is something you have never heard in a courtroom story before, and the twist is going to make your jaw drop completely. I have been doing this for 43 years, and even I had to pause when I read what was in that file. My clerk, Officer Hargrove, had been contacted the previous evening by a young woman named Amanda Cruz, 22 years old, who had seen the story shared in a local Providence Facebook community group. She had sent Officer Hargrove a series of screenshots, Instagram screenshots, from a private account, but an account that a mutual contact had shared with her. The account belonged to Connor Bradshaw, Instagram handle, Connor Brad PVD, 47,000 followers. The account was full of photographs of the Lamborghini, of vacations in Monaco, of watches and restaurants and bottles of things that cost more than most people's rent. But it was a specific Instagram story posted on November 14th at 9:47 p.m. that stopped everything in my courtroom cold. The story had been screenshotted before it disappeared after 24 hours. In the story, Connor Bradshaw was standing in what appeared to be a private event at a downtown restaurant. He was holding a bottle of Dom Perignon champagne. He was laughing, and the text overlay on the video read, and I'm going to read this exactly, "Daddy fixed it again, LOL. Some people really think rules apply to everyone equally." Posted at 9:47 p.m. on November 14th, 2 hours and 24 minutes after his Lamborghini had struck a young nursing assistant at 47 miles per hour at an intersection in Providence. Marcus Rivera was still on his feet in front of me when I read this out loud. I watched his face as I read those words. He closed his eyes for just a moment. And in that moment I thought about his mother, Elena Rivera, 51 years old, lying at home at 47 Spruce Street, waiting for the pain medication her son had been trying to bring her when all of this happened. I thought about the ironed shirt, the 2 jobs, the 3 to 4 months the doctors had given her. I looked up at Connor Bradshaw. His face had changed. For the first time all morning, those calm blue eyes were no longer calm. He looked at Pierce. Pierce was already scribbling something on a notepad, head down, not looking at his client. And in that moment, Connor Bradshaw understood that something had shifted in this room that his father's phone calls could not unshift. But I was not finished, because Officer Hargrove had also placed on my bench a second document. This one came from Detective Patricia Walsh, badge number 2247, of the Providence Police Department Internal Affairs Division. Detective Walsh had been building a case file, quietly, carefully, for the past 18 months, documenting a pattern of behavior involving Councilman Raymond Bradshaw and the misuse of political influence to interfere with traffic and DUI stops involving his son. This was not the first time. This was the 3rd time in 26 months that Connor Bradshaw had been involved in a moving violation that had subsequently been altered, reassigned, or quietly dismissed through what Detective Walsh's report described as coordinated interference with official police documentation. The most recent prior incident involved a DUI stop on Route 95 southbound on April 3, 2023 at 2:14 a.m., a stop made by Officer James Riley, badge 1089, which had been wiped from the central system within 72 hours of the initial report being filed. 36 hours ago, Detective Walsh had forwarded her complete findings to the Rhode Island State Police and to the Office of the United States Attorney for the District of Rhode Island. Federal obstruction of justice, witness tampering, abuse of public office. The charges being prepared against Councilman Raymond Bradshaw were not traffic violations. They were felonies. I'm going to be honest with you right now. I have sat on this bench through riots and recessions and 2 generations of this city's best and worst moments, and there have been perhaps 4 or 5 times in 43 years when the information sitting in front of me was so significant that I needed to take a breath before I could speak. This was one of those times. I set the documents down, I folded my hands, and I looked out at my courtroom. If you are watching this right now and you feel that anger rising in your chest, that righteous human anger that comes from watching a system get twisted by money and connections, I want you to know that you are not alone. That anger is what justice feels like before it becomes action. Join this community. Hit the like button and leave a comment below telling me what you believe Connor Bradshaw deserved, because what I'm about to tell you is going to either make you cheer or make you cry, possibly both, and I want to hear from every single one of you. I addressed Connor Bradshaw directly. I said, "Mr. Bradshaw, you came into my courtroom this morning carrying a great deal of confidence. I understand where that confidence comes from. Your father is a powerful man. You have resources that most people in this city will never have. You drive a car that costs more than many people earn in 10 years, and somewhere along the way, someone taught you or allowed you to believe that those things make the rules different for you, that justice has a price tag, that a courtroom is just another room where money and influence decide the outcome." I paused. I let that sit. I have spent 43 years on this bench making sure that this room is the one room in Providence where that belief gets corrected. Today is your correction. Connor Bradshaw opened his mouth. Pierce put a hand on his arm. Connor sat back. I continued. The charges against Marcus Rivera, failure to yield, expired registration, and reckless operation, are dismissed. All three. Dismissed entirely. The record will reflect that Mr. Rivera was traveling lawfully, that he was not the responsible party in this incident, and that he was, in fact, the victim of both a traffic collision caused by your client and a subsequent deliberate effort to misrepresent the facts of that collision in official police documentation. I looked at Pierce. Mr. Pierce, I trust you understand the implications of your client's situation as it now stands beyond the scope of my courtroom. Pierce gave one small nod. He did not speak. Then Detective Patricia Walsh, who had been seated in the back of my courtroom since 8:30 that morning, she had come in quietly in plain clothes, and I had known she was there, stood up. She walked down the center aisle and stopped at the front of the room. She identified herself. Badge 2247. She informed Connor Bradshaw that his attorney would be receiving formal documentation within the hour, that he was not being arrested in my courtroom that morning, but that he was being formally notified that federal and state charges related to the incidents documented in Detective Walsh's 18-month investigation were forthcoming, that he should not travel outside Rhode Island, and that his father, Councilman Raymond Bradshaw, had been placed on administrative leave by the City Council that same morning, pending the state investigation. Connor Bradshaw's face did something I had never seen a face do quite that way before. It went completely blank. Not angry, not frightened, just blank. Like all the certainty had been drained out of it at once. He looked at Pierce. Pierce was already on his phone, turned slightly away, speaking quietly. Connor looked down at the Louis Vuitton document case on the table. He did not move for a long moment, and then, I tell you this, not with satisfaction, but with simple truth, his shoulders dropped, just about half an inch, and for just a second the 29-year-old boy underneath all that Hermès and Rolex was visible, just for a second. I almost felt sorry for him, almost. I was not finished. I had one more thing to say to Connor Bradshaw before he left my courtroom. I said, "Mr. Bradshaw, while the federal matters proceed through the appropriate channels, I am issuing a civil order in connection with the damage sustained by Mr. Rivera's vehicle on November 14th. You will pay the full cost of repair or replacement of that vehicle, and you will perform 400 hours of community service. Those hours will be served at the Oncology and Palliative Care Unit at St. Mary's Hospital here in Providence." I watched his face register that. That is the same unit where patients like Mr. Rivera's mother receive care. You will serve those hours in direct support of the patients and the nursing staff on that floor. You will show up, you will be humble, and you will learn something about what the real world looks like for people who do not have a father to fix things. The courtroom was very still. And then I turned to Marcus Rivera, and I want to tell you what I saw when I looked at him. He was standing very straight. His hands were still on the railing. His eyes were wet, not crying, not yet, but wet, full, like a glass that is just at the very rim. And there was something on his face that I can only describe as relief so deep it looked like pain. The kind of relief that has been held back for so long that when it finally arrives, The body doesn't know what to do with it. He pressed his lips together and nodded at me. Just once. A small nod. A very dignified, very quiet thank you. I said, Marcus. I called him by his first name. I don't always do that, but this time I did. Go home to your mother, take her medication, sit with her, and know that this courtroom saw exactly who you are. I had to stop for a moment. I am going to be honest with you. My eyes were not dry at that point. After 43 years on this bench, I have earned the right to say that some things still move me, that some cases still reach through the robe and the gavel and 43 years of professional distance and grab you right in the chest. This was one of them. I said, you are a good son, and she is lucky to have you. Marcus Rivera looked at me for one long moment, and then he said, thank you, Your Honor. I'm going to go be with her. And he walked out of my courtroom with the same quiet dignity he had walked in with, except this time his shoulders were not carrying quite so much weight. This time the weight was a little lighter. I watched him go, and I sat there for a moment after the room began to settle. I thought about my own father, about what it means to show up for the people you love when the world makes it the hardest possible thing to do. I thought about what justice actually is, not the justice of fines and sentences and case numbers, but the justice of one human being seen and believed and treated with the dignity they deserve. That is what this room is for, not the paperwork, not the procedures, not the politics of who your father knows, or what car you drive, or how much your belt costs. This room exists for the moment when the truth becomes unavoidable, for the moment when the system remembers that it was built to protect the Marcus Riveras of this world, not the Connor Bradshaws. Connor Bradshaw left my courtroom with a federal investigation pending, a civil order against him, and 400 hours to spend learning what human suffering actually looks like up close. I do not know if it will change him. I have been doing this long enough to hold that uncertainty. But I know this. In my courtroom, on that November morning, the outcome was not arranged by anyone's phone calls. It was determined by the truth. It was determined by a surveillance camera at an intersection and a screenshot posted at 9:47 p.m. and an 18-month investigation by a detective who quietly believed that the system still had to mean something. Elena Rivera passed away on February 8, 2025, at 47 Spruce Street. She was 51 years old. Marcus was with her. He held her hand. I know this because he wrote me a handwritten letter on lined notebook paper. He thanked me. He said his mother had asked him to tell me that she was grateful her son came home that day, that the medication made the last months easier, that she was proud of him. I kept that letter. I keep it in my desk, not as a trophy, but as a reminder of what I am here to do, as a reminder that behind every case number in my stack of 22 folders on a November morning, there is a human life happening, a whole, complete, irreplaceable human life.